What's up, everybody? UFC Louisville just wrapped up, so let's go ahead and recap the event that was this week's UFC Fight Night card. Now, in terms of picks, we went 9-5 out of the 14 fights, so obviously not the most ideal in terms of our predictions, but we did make a little bit of money. We had a nice three-piece of Lapilus, Klein, and Rosas Jr. That ended up paying us pretty nicely. I do post my bets most of the time on Twitter, so make sure to follow my Twitter. It's Limpy Bets. That's where you're going to see me post my actual, my full card picks, my bets as well. So make sure to go ahead and follow that. Now, let's go ahead and recap this. We got a lot of fights to talk about. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and drop some comments down below on the videos. And let me know what you guys thought about UFC Louisville. Starting off the card was Ryan Amanda versus Puja Tomar. Now, I was working around the house early on in this card, so I didn't get to watch every single second of each fight, like the earlier fights. But from what I saw in this matchup, I don't know how, from what I saw, Ryan Amanda was, or Dos Santos they were calling her. She has like a million last names, but she was landing the more effective strikes throughout this fight that, from what I was able to see, Tomar really only found success with that side kick to the body. I don't know how Dos Santos did not address that earlier. I don't know why she wasn't more in on the wrestling, because watching tape on Puja, she struggled in that grappling department. So it was kind of odd to see that, because we have seen Dos Santos use that wrestling and grappling in her past fights. So that was kind of interesting to see. I don't know how. I'm pretty sure there was like wild scorecards where it was 30-27 for the opposite fighter on two separate judges' scorecards, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, regardless, I thought Dos Santos won. I thought she landed the more effective strikes, and all Tomar really offered was that side kick. Regardless, we ended up starting off the night with a loss. The first 5 fights, we went 1-4. It was absolutely a horrendous start. Regardless, we did bounce back later on in the night. So we got the first pick wrong. I don't know if the judges really got this one right. Didn't get to watch the entire 15 minutes, so I'm not going to scream robbery. I do have to rewatch the fight. But regardless, let's move on. Next up, we had Taylor Lapilus going up against Cody Stamann. Now, if you guys see me looking down, I'm just checking out my notes. I write down notes so I don't forget about exactly. I try to remember exactly what happened. But this fight basically went how I thought it would. Lapilus was piecing up Stamann on the feet. Stamann struggled with that ranginess of Lapilus. Lapilus had an 8.5-inch reach advantage, and he is just the overall better striker as well. Lapilus has fantastic takedown defense, and he showed that in this fight. But because of that range advantage that he had, it was really hard for Stamann to find those takedowns. He did end up landing one in the last round and got some like 2 minutes of top position, but ultimately he wasn't able to mount really anything in that spot. So on the feet, it was just a nice clinic from Lapilus. He was piecing up Stamann from range, and he was landing dirty knees up the middle and landed cleanly on Stamann multiple times. I don't know how Stamann ate those like they were nothing. They were super clean and flush knees that landed on the head of Cody. My official prediction, I think, was Lapilus by decision, because neither of these guys really are finishers at the UFC level. So we ended up getting this correct, and this is the only one out of the first 5 fights that I got right. But basically went exactly how I thought. Great win by Lapilus. I'm excited to watch him get it back into the octagon soon, because I don't think he really took much damage in this fight, despite going the entire 15 minutes. Next up, we had Eduarda Moura going up against Denise Gomes. Now, this fight, when I watched the weigh-ins, I was debating a pick flip to Denise Gomes after that weigh-in, because if you guys watched it, Eduarda Moura looked like death on that scale. She was all sucked up. It looked like she killed herself trying to get down to 115, and she still missed weight. So I was sitting there debating whether I should swap my pick, all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. But last week when I swapped my pick due to a weight miss, was the Lima over to the Raposo side, and ended up biting me in the ass. So I thought maybe I should just stick with my guns. Definitely should have swapped. Moura looked awful after that first round. She was diving for Denise Gomes' legs, and even though she was able to solidify some takedowns, Denise Gomes' defensive grappling has improved immensely since we first started on the Contender Series. And that's good to see, especially for considering how young of a fighter Denise is. She is 24 years old, and for her to be making these improvements at the UFC level every time she comes out, it's awesome to see. I'm excited to see her back in the cage. But in terms of Eduarda Moura, she did lose that 0. Denise Gomes, this was a split decision, a couple of weird split decisions tonight, but I don't think it was a split decision. Moura, you can give her the first round because of the wrestling, and she wasn't tired at that point. But the second and third round were clearly Gomes's. Moura was diving for legs, really wasn't mounting any offense because Gomes was able to, I think she was sweeping positions and being able to get back to her feet as well. But the clear advantage on the feet was on the Gomes's side. Now, Moura's striking actually wasn't terrible, despite her being a little bit tired in that third round. She was doing a good job hitting Denise at range, but she was just too exhausted, but I don't know why. Yeah, like I said, she was just diving for legs. It was not a good look on the Moura side. Bad pick on our part. We definitely should have followed our instinct after that weigh-in, but we'll know for next time. Everything's a learning experience. So Eduarda, another bad pick on my part. But yeah, definitely not a split decision in my opinion. Should have been 29-28 Denise Gomes, 100%. Let's move on to the next fight. Next up, we had John Castaneda going up against Daniel Marcos. Now, I chose against the undefeated fighter, and it was a terrible pick. John Castaneda, although he was in this fight, he did get wobbled a few times. I think he got dropped in the first round as well. And beyond the last 20 seconds where I believe it was a head kick, if my memory serves me correctly, he wobbled Marcos, who started backing up, but there was obviously not enough time. Castaneda was trying to chase him down, but in that big octagon, it was hard to get to him, and Marcos ended up surviving. But this was an absolute striking clinic on the side of Daniel Marcos. Typically, we've seen him kind of be low volume and wait to counter, but he was on the front foot, pushing the pace this time, backing up Castaneda, who was fighting how we thought he would. He had a lot of movement, he was throwing a lot of kicks, but ultimately Marcos is just levels ahead of him on the feet, and he showed his skills in the striking department in this fight throughout the entirety of it. It was never close. It was just destruction on the Marcos side. I thought Castaneda would be a live underdog because of the Marcos' tendency to sometimes struggle with that weird movement. We saw it in the Davey Grant fight, and I kind of drew similarities between that matchup as well. But honestly, I'm excited to see Marcos back in the cage, man. The guy's striking is so elite, and I love watching fantastic kickboxing like that. Like I said, it was never a close fight. Marcos was piecing up Castaneda throughout the entirety of that 15 minutes. So another bad pick on our part. And that minus 125 tag for Marcos was an absolute steal. Anybody that got on that is probably the best value we're going to have on Marcos for a very long time after that performance. Next up, Brad Katona actually, it was Andrea Lee, I'm pretty sure, and Montana De La Rosa first. So this fight actually kind of it kind of pissed me off. The only reason why I say that is because it was another split decision that should not have been a split decision. I understand the second round was pretty close, so nothing really significant happened in that second round, but I did score it for De La Rosa. Even though I picked Lee, I scored the second and third round for De La Rosa. You can't really give De La Rosa the first round, even though she did have a pretty tight triangle choke, I believe it was, in that first, but Andrea Lee, great job defending that. She escaped that submission, and she ended up dropping De La Rosa, I believe, with a back fist. I don't know if it was a spinning back fist, but she caught her with a back fist that dropped De La Rosa. And because of that, and there was nothing really other than that submission attempt on the De La Rosa side that you could really score for her. Because of that knockdown, and Lee looked great on the feet in that first round, but second round, like I said, it was pretty close. I guess you can make a case for Lee. I had it the second and third round for De La Rosa, but in that third round, De La Rosa flattened Lee down on the mat, flattened her out, had her back and was ground and pounding, and Lee didn't do much on the feet before or after. After that moment that De La Rosa had, she had no sense of urgency to try to finish that fight. It was clearly 1-1, in my opinion, going into that third, and Andrea Lee did not have a sense of urgency to get that win. De La Rosa definitely deserved this win. I don't think it was a split decision. Regardless, we started off 1-4 on picks in the night. It was looking like it was gonna be a terrible night, but this is where our tide started to turn, and it was the Brad Katona Jesse Butler match. Now, Brad Katona fought like a -700 favorite. He came in as the largest favorite on the card, and he looked. Honestly, we'll get to another one that looked like a -700 favorite, who was actually an underdog later on in this fight, or later on in this breakdown. But Katona came in, solidified a takedown in each of the 3 rounds, and did not let Butler up, I believe. And after any of those takedowns, he was mauling him on the mat. Obviously, not the most exciting fight. He was still able to inflict damage on Butler, but he came in as a -700 favorite, looked like he earned that tag, like he deserved that tag, and there's nothing really much to say. Domination over 15 minutes for Brad Katona, and our luck started to turn around. Next up, we had Charles Radtke and Carlos Prates. Now, Charles Radtke was like a lot of people's favorite underdog in this event. I don't blame them. In my breakdown video, I recognized the danger of Charles Radtke. In my Twitter video, when I was breaking down my confidence levels for each of my picks, I was mentioning the danger factor that Radtke has, but I just had faith in Prates to be the better striker, to be able to defend those takedowns from Radtke, which he actually did. The fight only lasted 1 round. I don't know when Prates ended up getting the finish, but he fought off those takedowns well. Radtke was looking pretty explosive. He was looking like he was throwing heavy, but Prates was able to keep that distance. He was able to avoid those big, heavy shots from Radtke. But it was such a nasty finish. He kneed Radtke so aggressively in the liver that, like, I don't think I've seen a more aggressive body KO in the UFC before live. Like, this guy wound up, landed such a flush knee, and Charles Radtke, like, I swear he got picked up off the ground from how explosive that knee was, and immediately hunched over, grabbed his abdomen, and just curled up on the mat. I could not imagine the pain he was feeling after that knee. That was absolutely disgusting on the side of Prates. I'm glad we ended up going with Prates because, like I said, Radtke was a very popular underdog this week. I just had too much faith in the ability of Prates on the feet, where I knew Radtke was going to try to keep up with him because of his most recent success on the feet in that Urbina fight, in that Blood Diamond fight as well. And I had faith in Prates' ability in the striking and ability to stop those takedowns. Prates is becoming a very exciting prospect in the welterweight division. He didn't take much damage or any at all, basically, so I'm hoping he bounces back quickly. I love his fighting style. I'd like to see him in that octagon ASAP. Next up, we had Ludovic Klein against Thiago Moises. Now, this was an absolute striking clinic on the side of Ludovic Klein. He was one of my most confident picks this card, even though he only had like a -138 tag. Thiago Moises needs to wrestle, he needs to grapple to find success in his fights, and I trusted Ludovic Klein's wrestling takedown defense. He's shown signs of being able to fend off those takedowns, and he did spectacular in that department in this fight. Moises, I think, was only able to land 1 takedown in the 3rd round, I believe, and Ludovic Klein ended up popping right back up. In terms up to that point from the 1st and 2nd round, despite the perfect timing of takedown attempts on the Moises side and the explosiveness in those takedowns, the core strength of Ludovic Klein to push him off and dig for those underhooks immediately was amazing to see. Ludovic Klein was miles ahead in the striking, and late in that 1st round, he was actually able to wobble Moises, throw off the equilibrium, and almost put him away. I don't know how Moises ended up surviving that, but other than that, it was just Klein basically defending those takedowns and piecing up Thiago Moises throughout that entire fight. Fantastic win for him. Obviously, it would have been cooler to see him get that finish, but regardless, it was an absolute clinic on the Ludovic Klein side. Big fan of his, and I'm excited to see him back in the octagon as well. So that's, what is that? After the Andrea Lee one, we got the Katona pick, which is -700. I'm not floating my boat on that one. Prates and now Ludovic Klein. Let's continue. This is the other fighter that looked like he should have been a -700 favorite, but he was the underdog. Punahele Soriano took on Miguel Baeza. Now, when I broke down this fight, I said neither of these fighters can be trusted. Baeza's coming off of more than 2-year layoff and coming off of back-to-back KOs. Punahele Soriano is 1-4 in his last. It was 1-4 in his last 5 fights, and he was moving down to welterweight from middleweight, which is a huge difference in weight. So there was a lot of unknowns going into this fight. I just put my trust in Soriano, the more active fighter, as opposed to Miguel Baeza, who 2 years ago I probably would have picked to win this match, but I didn't know how he was going to look back in the octagon after being gone for so long, plus coming off of back-to-back KO losses. And on the Soriano side, this guy has a D1 wrestling background, but he never seems to use the wrestling. So I did not expect him to come into this fight and implement that as his main game plan. He took down and controlled Baeza for once, basically, for every round. The most success that Baeza had was a leg lock / heel hook submission attempt in that first round, but he was hanging on, and Punahele Soriano was just lighting him up, just absolutely dusting him, and he landed, I believe, over 300 strikes or something like that in that fight. I think he broke the single round record for the most ground strikes or something. I was listening to the commentator say. Soriano looked like a minus 1,000 favorite, and he was the plus 170 underdog. It was insanity to watch that fight. There's literally no other word than domination on the Soriano side. That's the only way you can explain this fight. Miguel Baeza looked like shit in this fight. I can't beat around the bush. I don't know if he's going to be back. I think that's 4 losses in a row. He was 10-0, and he's lost his last 4 in a row. That was insane. If Punahele Soriano looks a fraction of that in his next fight, he's probably going to get another win. If that's him at 170, I think he's going to make some noise in the welterweight division. But who knows, man? That could have been a one-off. Who knows how he's going to look in his next fight? That was complete and utter domination. No other way to spell it out, say it. Let's move on. Another great pick on our end. And the streak continues. We go up to Julian Marquez and Zachary Reese. Another underdog pick that we ended up winning. I don't know how Reese was the underdog, but he was plus 110. This guy finishes Julian Marquez in 20 seconds. There's nothing to break down in this fight. Zach Reese said in his post-fight interview that he's trying to kind of slow down his fights so he's not known as the first-rounder bust kind of guy, but he didn't need to wait in this fight. Not at all. This guy moves forward. The first combination he throws, he knocks out Julian Marquez. Throws a left body kick. Lands nice and flush. Julian Marquez starts backing up. Zachary Reese, left hook, right uppercut, and Julian Marquez gets put to sleep. He follows it up with some shots that were unnecessary in my opinion. Marquez was out. Regardless, Zachary Reese won an emphatic first round KO. Never mind first round, 22nd KO victory for Zachary Reese. Nice bounce back for him after getting slam KO'd by Cody Brundage in his UFC debut. I said in my breakdown video I wasn't ready to write off Zachary Reese after that. I don't want to say fluke, but like he got knocked out by the canvas. Wasn't ready to write him off just yet, and he came in 22nd KO. What else is there to say? Let's move on. Bruno Ferreira going up against Dustin Stoltzfus. Now, I was worried about this pick because I know after that first round, Ferreira can fade, and Stoltzfus can turn it up there in the wrestling department as the fight goes on. So I was worried about that, but we didn't even have to worry about it. Bruno Ferreira knocks out Dustin Stoltzfus in the first round. There was a lot of back and forth between these two for the amount of time that this fight lasted for. Bruno Ferreira landed a couple of heavy overhand rights that Dustin Stoltzfus just ate. He just ate them and kept coming forward and kept fighting Ferreira. I don't know how he didn't drop after those few right hands. I don't know how he ate that. Regardless, the accumulation, I guess, got to him because Bruno Ferreira later was able to land a spinning elbow that wobbled Stoltzfus. Stoltzfus was able to shake off the cobwebs and stay into that fight. But later, Ferreira lands another spinning elbow. This time it was more like it was like an upwards one. I can't really do it in my chair, but he like spins this way and his elbow ends up going up in like this kind of a motion and landed right on the eye. It looked like it was like right on the eye or like on the temple area, and just Stoltzfus just he fell down, but then he got up right away, but he was out of it. He got what a beautiful knockout for Ferreira. I don't know how he was going to look after the first round if it ended up going into the second, because he was throwing so much heat with everything that he threw at Dustin. He had power behind every single strike, so I was worried if he didn't get that finish, but it doesn't matter because he ended up finishing Dustin Stoltzfus. I feel bad, honestly. Every time I watch a KO, I get so excited because that's obviously a very exciting moment when we're watching MMA, especially if it's the fighter that you chose to win that gets the KO. And then I start to feel bad because Stoltzfus is 2-5 in the UFC, probably isn't going to fight in the UFC anymore. Regardless, great win for Ferreira. I'm excited to see him get back in the octagon, as well as many of these winners tonight. And the winning streak continues. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a row. I think it ends at this one. No, it does not. Rosas Jr. takes on Ricky Turcios, and this was the last leg of the 3-piece parlay that we had. We had it with Taylor Lapilus, Ludovic Klein, and Rosas Jr. Now, in that first round, I was stressing out. But before we get into that, correct me if I'm wrong, but Ricky Turcios did such a dick move at the beginning. I swear I saw Rosas going in for the glove touch, and Turcios just kind of looked at him and was walking forward, and then threw a head kick. Anyway, Ricky Turcios ends up getting taken down by Rosas Jr. as we expected. Rosas' wrestling is fantastic, especially for a 19-year-old that is fresh. Well, I guess he's got 10 fights under his belt now, but great wrestling from him. His takedowns are great. Ricky was able to like kind of mount some punches. Rosas was really focused on position over submission in this fight, which is obviously great to see from a 19-year-old who's adapting in the octagon, in the UFC as well. He got a takedown, was able to get some control, but Turcios used his grappling to kind of sweep the positions and get to Rosas's back, and almost sunk in a rear naked choke. I was stressed out because I swear it looked like Rosas was going in for the tap, but he's like, no way I'm losing to Turcios. No way I'm losing in the octagon again. He fought those hands. He fought through that adversity, and he ended up breaking out of that submission, reverse positions, and ended the round on top of Turcios. Second round comes in. He does the same thing, solidifies that takedown up against the cage. But this time, he was the one that was able to take the back, locked up that had the body lock with the legs, and there was 4 minutes left in the round, so he kept softening up Turcios, snuck in that arm, and ended up finishing the rear naked choke and got the submission victory. Fantastic. I love watching this kid fight. Obviously, when he gets his striking, he doesn't have the most exciting style, because obviously we would like to see people strike, but in terms of knowing his skill set, he knows he's able to dominate on the ground. He lands those takedowns, and once he works on a little bit better control, once he works on his striking, I think he's going to be a real problem. But for now, I don't want to rush him. He's still super young. Let him keep getting these winnable fights. That's going to obviously, you still want to push him a little bit, but don't push him too high up the rankings now and start getting him some losses. Build him up slowly. Still a very young kid. He's showing signs of a solid skill set. So anyway, he didn't take much damage. He said he wants to fight at the Sphere. I think at the Sphere is for Mexican independence. I could be completely wrong, but book him on that card. Give the kid a nice spot in this for the first UFC event in the Sphere. Next up, we go to the co-main event, and this is where our streak ended. We had Dustin Jacoby, and it wasn't necessarily like a confident pick on the Jacoby side. It was more of my lack of confidence for Dominic Reyes, because he has been knocked out in his last 3 fights, I believe. 3 fights in a row, if I'm not mistaken. Regardless, I couldn't trust the guy's chin, but if there was a fight that I was happy to get wrong in terms of a pick, it was definitely this one. These are those stories that you like I have to be practical. So I went to the Jacoby side because I know his kickboxing is good, and Reyes has fallen off a cliff since that John Jones fight. He's been knocked out numerous amounts of times since then as well. So logically, I couldn't go with Reyes, but I'm so happy he ended up getting the win. He got a first-round knockout of Jacoby, which I did not see coming. But during one of Jacoby's blitzes, while Reyes was up against the fence, Reyes was able to land a fat left hook, wobbles Jacoby, and Reyes just saw red. He pounced on Jacoby and just got the finish. I'm so high. You could tell that that win meant so much to him. I was so happy to see him get the win, regardless of my pick. That doesn't matter. I'm excited to see somebody like Dominic Reyes finally get back into that win column. Hopefully his chin is back. I don't know. He didn't really get tagged too heavily in this matchup. It didn't last long enough, in my opinion. But regardless, I was happy to get this one wrong. Let's move on to the main event. Now let's talk about this stoppage. What do you guys think about that stoppage? All right, so Jared Cannonier, his jab was amazing in this fight. His leg kicks were devastating, powerful. The slaps that you heard off of Imavov's legs were nasty. He looked much better early on than I thought. I thought Imavov was going to be better early and then kind of fade as the fight went, but it was kind of the opposite if you think about it. Jared Cannonier came out, like I said, great leg kicks, great jab, and he was able to solidify a decent amount of control time up against the fence in the clinch. So Imavov was he couldn't find that timing. He couldn't really find that range early on, but as the fight went on, he was kind of learning Cannonier's movements. He was able to start landing a little bit better in that second and third round, but he couldn't fight off that clinch control from Cannonier. Now, even though, like I said, Cannonier was landing decent shots with the jab, with the leg kicks, I think Imavov was still the better striker. Regardless of volume, I think he landed the better shots. The clinch control was solid on the Cannonier side. And that was basically what was going on from between the first and the third rounds. I think I had Imavov up 2-1 going into the fourth. Maybe it could have been 2-1 for either fighter going into the fourth. Now, in that fourth round, Imavov was finding more success. He landed a big right hand that wobbled Cannonier. And regardless of what you want to say about an early stoppage, it does not look good visually to the ref when a fighter gets wobbled and is full-on running away from their opponent. Cannonier gets wobbled, it finds his wits a little bit, and starts running to the cage, wobbling the whole time. Imavov lands a knee, lands a few more shots. Cannonier wobbling, running away again. And like I understand the stoppage, it was a tad early because the only reason why I say that is because Cannonier was throwing back. He was throwing back very close to the time that Jason Herzog stopped the fight. I don't know if anything would have changed. Maybe Imavov lands a few more. Maybe Cannonier gets his wits about him and ends up surviving, but I'm not going to scream. Like, obviously, I'm excited because Imavov got the win, and I had him as my pick, but I think it could have gone a little bit longer. Regardless, nice win for Imavov. I don't know if they're going to run it back. People are screaming, oh, early stoppage, run it back, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. Imavov, I thought would look much better early. He looked better as the fight went on. Complete opposite of what I thought. Regardless, we finish off the night 9-5. I'll be dropping my breakdown video for UFC Vegas 93, Alex Perez versus Tatsuro Taira in the next few days, so make sure to check out that video when it drops. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed UFC Louisville.